Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast, and I'm really grateful that you're tuning in to listen to us today. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host, and I'm a career and life coach for women. And my vision for this show is to create resources that help women navigate career and life challenges more easily and to know that they are not alone. So, with each weekly conversation, we intend to inspire women worldwide to become more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and in their lives. So, if something strikes a chord as you listen and you want more information, be sure to check out the show notes below so that you can check into the various ways that you can connect with my guest and me. So, life transitions can affect our careers in many ways, but few are as challenging as caring for aging parents while managing a responsible corporate position or any job for that matter. Many of us may be facing this challenge now, or we will be soon. So, in this episode, I've invited Kim and Mike Barnes to join me. They are award winning journalists with over 30 years of experience on TV. And while their two kids have recently graduated from college, which makes them empty nesters, they are experiencing yet another life transition as they care for their parents who are in their 80s. Mike's mother has advanced Alzheimer's, and Kim's single mom faces different challenges. So, drawing on their personal and professional experiences, Kim and Mike recognized a need for advice and resources for adult children in similar situations. So, in 2021, they launched Parenting for Aging Parents to provide caregivers content, connection, and community. Their goal is to ensure that no one feels alone during this challenge. I talk about that a lot. None of us are made to be alone in any situation, but this is particularly a challenging time. And they have information and resources to help people navigate this stage of life. So we'll be exploring their journey and discuss the common challenges adult children face when caring for aging parents while balancing work and self care. Hello, Kim, Mike. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
We are so glad to be with you today.
Yes, thank you.
It is my pleasure. I have a soft spot in my heart for this topic, this particular life transition, and how it affects us in our careers. Because I also am a caregiver, as you are. My situation is different. I'm a caregiver for my husband. You're caregivers for your parents. So I would love it if you would share a bit of your story and what inspired you to create this collection of resources that you call Parenting for Aging Parents.
I'll let you start with this because
Yeah,
this was kind
I,
of your
I
idea.
get the credit or the blame, depending on how you want to look at it. My mom, as you mentioned, has Alzheimer's, and she started showing sign about 10 years ago or so. And at the time, my mom and dad lived out, I guess you'd say, in the country, about an hour outside of Dallas, Texas. And as my mom's Alzheimer's got a little bit worse, my sister and I have one sister. We talked to my dad about the fact that we think it would be better not only for mom, but also for dad, as he was taking care of her 24/7. He doesn't cook. So he would take her out to breakfast, take her out to lunch, take her out to dinner, which was fine. He could afford it, but it was wearing on him as he was getting close to 80 years old. At the time, we said, we think it would be better if you moved from the house in the country into town into an independent living place. My dad was a little resistant at first because he kind of pictured a nursing home like my grandfather lived in his last couple of years of life. But he moved in, and within a month, he's on the phone, son, this is the best move I ever made. So he did that, and they lived there for about 3 years. That my dad still lives there, but after about 3 years of living there, my sister and I talked to my dad again because Alzheimer's was getting even worse, and we said, "Mom needs extra care, and you can't give it, and give it to her, and it's wearing on you even more. We should move her into a memory care place." And again, he was very open to it and said, okay, y'all are in charge. So we went and looked at 4 memory care places that were very close to the independent living place where they lived. And I went into it with the attitude like, oh, this is going to be easy. It's kind of like looking for an apartment in my 20s. We'll just make sure that there's a closet big enough for my mom's clothes and that I'll be good. But I got in there and I started, we went to these places and got tours, and I realized I had no idea the questions to ask, what the red flags could be, what to look for. I had no idea other than, well, that seems nice. So I came home from that because we're about 3 hours away from them. And I drove home that evening and told Kim, I think we need to start something like a Facebook group because I was so overwhelmed.
And even though they were very prepared with financial documents, legal documents, they had all that figured out, they realized quickly that I don't understand the jargon. We don't know that there are resources and people that can potentially help you find the right place for your parent. And in that same time, we were also noticing challenges with my mom, getting her to move into independent living from living by herself in a home, no longer driving. And that wasn't an ideal situation for her. And during this whole time period too, I started noticing that I had friends that had parents going through stuff, but nobody talks about it. I didn't know about it until something came up that was sort of pressing, because we don't typically talk about these topics, which because of that, it makes us feel like, oh, I must be the only one going through this. So we isolate and we're in our own bubble trying to figure everything out, recreate the wheel, when if we would talk about it, we can all help each other, which is really the goal behind the what we started and what we're trying to accomplish.
I love that. I love that. I love that you did that, and that you took it upon yourselves. Well, if I'm confused, other people might be confused too, right? If I don't know what questions to ask, and you guys are bright, smart, articulate people, right? You should know, right? And I
Right.
think that's what we think. I should know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to navigate this without any problem. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
said, Mike, it's like finding an apartment when I was in my
Yeah.
20s.
Right.
Not so much,
No.
right?
Well, and we've
Yeah,
never done this before. So of course
right.
we assume that we should know, but we haven't done it. So how would we know? We
And
haven't
you're
had to understand all of these different topics.
absolutely, and you're so right that we are quiet caregivers, many of us, right?
Mhm.
We think I can handle this, and so much of what happens, in the shadows
Mm-hmm.
of
Mhm.
life. It is the best way I can describe it, right?
Well, and we think, oh, they won't understand. Because we don't talk about it, we don't realize that they're going through something really
They
similar,
might be
or
going
at
through
least
it
have
too.
the empathy to be able to appreciate it as well.
Well, not only that, we
Right.
don't like to talk about it because it's kind of depressing.
Mhm.
You don't like to say, "Yeah, mom's got Alzheimer's; it's getting worse, and
She doesn't recognize
she doesn't
me.
recognize me anymore." You don't want to bring the party down. Whether it's a one-on-one conversation or a group of people. I like to compare it to having a baby. Because at least for Kim and me, when we had our first baby, we had no idea what we were doing. Kim knew how to change the diaper, and she had to teach me. But otherwise, we didn't know anything we were doing. It was all kind of guesswork. But everyone around us, friends, neighbors, relatives, coworkers, they all had advice for us. They all
Because it's a
had
happy event.
exactly,
Right, exactly.
because good things are going to happen. The baby's going to sleep through the night. The baby's going to stop having gas. The baby's going to start to crawl, start to walk, all the fun stuff, and you're going to smile about it.
Yeah.
But you don't do that with an aging parent because you don't want to bring the party down by saying, "Yeah, mom has incontinence and it's not very pretty." And you got any ideas for me? You just don't want to do that. And that's why
Yeah.
we all kind of live in silence if we
Yeah.
don't know that there's help out there.
I love that you created this community for people to commiserate and to share
Mhm.
um, ideas, and if I don't know what question to ask, maybe someone's at a stage, later than I am, and they've asked those questions and they can help me. I
Mhm.
love that. That is, I have great respect for what you guys have done. So I think about this. So both my parents are gone, and I was a long distance caregiver for my father. He was the last to go. This is, though, a significant role reversal that we have to experience and we have to navigate, and it can be really challenging on both sides. You know,
Mhm.
your dad was a little resistant, but then said, "You guys know, I'm following your lead."
Yeah.
Right? Not
Mhm.
everybody has that
Right.
Mhm.
experience, right? So
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
do you make that adjustment successfully and get your parents to listen to you?
It can be really, really challenging. I was just talking to a woman last night who said that her dad and her grandfather won't talk about it because her grandfather thinks that it'll jinx him. That if he talks about where he wants to live, what might happen when he passes, that'll make it happen sooner than it's supposed to. So he won't talk about it. And when you have that situation, it's really, really hard
Yeah.
because it's not your problem until it is. Uh, so I think that for most families, I feel like when you can understand the family dynamics that are involved,
Mhm.
meaning, what are the sibling relationships? Which sibling has which relationship with the parent? If there's more than one kid, if you're an only child, what are those dynamics? Because I think that one of the biggest challenges is that all of the things that might have been issues when we were growing up come crashing back,
Yep.
whether it's who's the favorite or mom listens to them or this kid takes advantage of mom or whatever. And I think that can be really, really challenging, as well as just what is that relationship like? And the fact that they still see you potentially as a 12-year-old who doesn't know. Well, we've
Mhm.
talked to people who have a sister who's a PhD in nursing, and the mom says, well, you don't know what you're talking about, when it comes to medical stuff. And obviously she does. So I think part of it is really thinking about what is the relationship that you have with your parents, using in some ways your siblings to have a team effort, not that you want to gang up on them or anything, but just
Sometimes you need it though.
but have that reinforcement. But
Mhm.
I know from my mom that if I appeal to her as to this is for your we're doing this because we think this will be better for you, this is to benefit you, that can be a way that I think is successful for in our relationship a lot of times. Also, potentially, if they have that caring bone, like
Mhm.
most parents, that this will make it easier for me to help you if you allow us to understand some of the things that are going on medically or financially or legally or whatever. So it's really having to think of, some ways, think about it in their shoes, because they don't want help, most likely, most likely than any more than you want to, then they don't want to have to give up their freedom either. And so
Right.
just kind of thinking about where are they coming from,
Yeah.
and what
But
can you appeal to them.
that's also the hardest
Yeah.
part is you can't take a Post-it note and say, okay, here's what you do,
Right.
because we're all different.
Mhm.
What I do with my mom and dad doesn't necessarily work for Kim and her mom. It doesn't work for other people because, again, everyone has different personalities, different family
Right.
dynamics, and different people. Even look at my dad. I'll use my dad as an example. He treats himself differently than he treats my mom, and by that I mean my sister and I went to dad as mom's Alzheimer's was getting worse, and we started talking about memory care, and we used the example that if mom had something, a different type of disease, if she had cancer or heart problems or something like that, we would be getting whatever care needed, maybe
Absolutely.
not to fix her, but to help her do better.
Mhm.
Help her get through this with less pain and less strife, to make things a little bit easier on her and for him.
Mhm.
That
He
is such
understood.
a that's a powerful tip you just gave us.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. So I want everybody to think about that. How can you reframe the situation
Yeah.
so they'll understand it better? And you're so right. If they needed some immediate medical attention
Mhm.
Hmm.
for their
Yep.
heart, or they broke
Mhm.
a hip, or fell down and whatever,
Right.
they
And they're
would go for
bleeding.
medical
Yeah.
you,
treatment.
you would do
So
something.
because of that, again, dad was like, okay, I understand. Even though that meant he would be away from his wife most of the time after being married for 60 plus years,
Mhm.
he understood and he agreed, and he let us find a place. And my mom's been living there for almost exactly 2 years, and she's doing great. Today is her birthday, and
Wow.
and dad's going to go see her, and it's great. He's handling it really well. But understand his attitude about that, because it's all for mom.
Mhm.
Well, about
Yeah.
6 months, it was about a year and a half ago now, about 6 months after she moved into memory care, dad had a little checkup, and my sister took him to the doctor, had a little checkup, goes home, and the doctor calls my sister, says, get your dad to the emergency room. He needs a pacemaker. My
Oh,
sister's all frantic. They go to the emergency room. This is during not the height of
a
COVID, but
resurgence.
it was a resurgence of COVID. So the hospital was kind of full, and the cardiologist wasn't around. He was gone for the day. So they said, yeah, we can try to find a place for you, or you can go home and then come back tomorrow.
Or stay here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or stay in the hospital.
Yeah. That's it. They could find a room
Yeah.
for him at the hospital, or he could go home. He's like, well, I think maybe I'll go home. My sister's like, no, Dad, you need to stay here. Hold on. Let me call my brother. Mike, talk to your dad. Yeah. So I'm on the
Again,
phone.
you gotta like
It's the day before my birthday. Kim and our two kids were in town, and they were taking me out to dinner. I'm in the parking lot of the restaurant. I'm on the phone with my dad saying, Dad, please stay at the hospital. Please. I don't want to wake up on my birthday and found out that you went home and you died. Please don't do that to me.
because you're too stubborn to stay at the
Yes,
hospital.
please don't do that. And he's like, okay, son. Okay. Please, Dad, can you do that, please? And let's get this taken care of tomorrow, please. Okay, son. Okay. Goodbye. He hangs up, looks at my sister and says, take me home.
Oh dear.
Because that's my dad.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, this is a pain being at the hospital. They don't have room
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go home. He wasn't as worried about himself like he worries about my mom, which
Yeah.
I guess shows the love he has for her.
Mhm.
But again, you've got to understand not only who you're talking to, but who are you dealing with? You know, I have to deal with my dad differently if we're talking about dad and mom, or
Mhm.
dad just taking care of himself.
Mhm.
Right. There's so many complexities here.
Yes.
And you're so right about the relationships and how the old relationships that we had when we were younger
Mhm.
that, we could ignore or we could avoid.
Mhm.
They come crashing down, like you said,
Mhm.
when this situation, when a family has to face this situation with elderly parents.
Yeah.
Mhm. For sure.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the key topics that adult children need to discuss with their parents. What are some of those?
Having discussions about housing is so important because there are going to be some parents who say, I want to be in my home forever till my last breath, no matter what. And then that may or may not be super practical depending on their condition, their diagnosis as they progress. It could be, and it might be just fine. So having those conversations ahead of time, a lot of these conversations, the earlier you can have them, the better. But when you can find out, what are they open to? What would their preferences be? And if all things are not equal, what are they open to? And what can they afford
Yeah.
it leads into that other part as well. Are they okay? Can they afford to have 24/7 care at home, which can run tens of thousands of dollars a month? Or are they okay with the idea of moving into an independent or an assisted living kind of community where they can get that care? And frankly, for my mom, the socialization was really important.
Yeah.
So the housing is
Yeah,
one really important conversation.
Housing is big. And like I said before, my dad, if we hadn't said anything with dad would still be at home.
Mhm.
He loved being at home. He loves his house. In fact, when they sold the house, he was like, son, I kind of feel weird because I don't own the house anymore. It's like, Dad, you're okay. You're living in a great place. You have the money. It's like, yeah, but I don't own anything.
Mhm.
And for some people, again, people born in the 20s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
it means something to own something. So
Mhm.
that was a challenge. And again, he pictured a nursing home, not a nice independent living place. He moved into that place and loved it. And I went up to see him 2 days ago for my mom's birthday and visited with him, and then went to go see my mom. And my dad, we call him the mayor. He's like the mayor of the place. He walks around. He's always giving people trouble. Hey, did you get enough to eat today? Okay. And he's just talking to everybody. He loves that.
Right.
So if they love the social part of it, it keeps them from being isolated and lets them get out and enjoy more people.
Yeah. So housing is super important. Certainly that leads to the finances, which are also really important to know. Not that you have to be all in their business, but do you know what they can afford? What kind of income do they have coming in? Do they have debt? All of those things will play into decisions in the future. And so it's really important to start having those conversations when it can be a little more lighthearted, if you will, than when it becomes, oh my gosh, we need to move you and we found this place, but oh wait, you can't afford it, or whatever the issue might be with the finances. So that's really important.
Take my mom as an example, is that when we went to Dad and said, we need to move Mom into memory care. And he said, sure, y'all are in charge. And we found a place, and it's almost $6,000 a month. And we pick it out and, okay, this is good. Dad, we're going to move Mom. if we didn't know that he could afford it, if he's like going, well, that's good, but we bring in $3,000 a month total with all of our Social Security and any investments, that's all we have. If he had said that, we're like, oh my gosh, well, what are we going to do? But the fact that we knew, we don't have to see the balance sheet, but if you have a general idea of what mom and dad can afford, do they have debt? Do they have pensions coming in? What do they have, so that you know what they can afford? Again, it just makes life better, so that the crisis won't be as big. When something happens, like moving mom to memory care, or, oh my gosh, dad fell and you got to move him into a skilled nursing facility or into assisted living, you know that they can afford this, as opposed to, I don't know what we're going to do. I guess we're going to have to find a bedroom here in the house and move them in with us. People have to go through that. And when you don't wait until the last minute, so that when it's a crisis, when one of those bad things happens, it's not fun. Moving mom into memory care was not fun, but knowing ahead of time that, okay, we don't have to worry about the money because I know dad can afford it. Okay, let's just take care of the problem at hand.
The emotions and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all of these are very much tied into all the legal topics as well. Making sure that you have all those legal documents taken care of and things like that. Because
we're going to get to that in a minute, but I want to focus for a moment on what you just talked about, the emotional upheaval of all of this on all sides, right? That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, because they may or may not be really excited about the move, because it's
willing participants.
Yeah, sometimes they're not necessary. We hear that in the group all the time. We're moving mom and she's
not happy,
mad. And that's just it's really hard when you feel like, I really think this is the right thing, and yet mom is upset about it. I mean, this is a silly example, but because it can be the smallest thing, it can be the biggest thing. It can be the emotions of, I'm leaving my mom and separating my parents and putting her in memory care, and dad now living separately, which is a huge emotional, I don't know if burden is the right word, but it can be as simple as, we took my mom's checkbook away because she had gotten scammed multiple times. And every once in a while she'll just say, I'm really mad about that. And I say, I know. And I know that's really hard, but we just are trying to protect you so that you don't get scammed again.
Right.
And she's like, okay, all right. So it can be, it's going to be emotional. And I think that was one of the things that has surprised me a little bit, because I am kind of just naturally and many of us are just sort of the fixers, like, what's the solution? Okay, here's the problem. What's the solution? And let's take the steps that we need. But I think for me, it's been, some of the emotional part has been harder for me than I would have expected, because it's sad. I mean, so much of it is really hard and sad, that I don't like it that she doesn't remember that we had a conversation that we already had.
Right.
Or that we can't allow her to have her checkbook for fear that another person's going to scam her out of money again. So it's hard.
And there's guilt as well.
Sure.
And some parents will intentionally apply the guilt, right? They'll lay it on pretty thick. Some do it unknowingly. And some parents don't even have to say a word.
And we do it ourselves.
Right. We put it on ourselves. We feel guilty. They're mad. I'm forcing her to do this, whatever, because it's the best thing for her. I know that in my heart, yet I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Tough emotions that are just woven throughout this entire life stage and these kinds of transitions that we go through. All right, so let's talk about, you started to talk about the legal documents. What are some of those critical documents that we need to know about?
Start with the powers of attorney.
Yeah.
There's a durable, or kind of
Financial.
the financial one that allows somebody to be able to pay bills, sell property, mess with legal, with financial bank accounts and things like that, if you're not already a signer. And they can be written in different ways so that they can allow certain privileges and maybe not others at any given time. But the powers of attorney, the durable one, and then there's also a medical one. And it can be the same person. It doesn't have to be. Maybe you have a kid who's, one of the children is a nurse. So being the medical power of attorney probably would make a lot of sense. And if you have
often the kid who lives closer to them is better for medical.
Right. So those are going to be the two kind of powers of attorney that a lot of people don't realize they really need both of those.
Yeah. And getting a will, of course. Some people think, oh, well, I don't want to fill out a will because you're just trying to get my money.
Or I don't have very much.
Or I don't have very
Yeah.
much. But it helps. But we have somebody in the group who posted, my dad's 89, dementia's getting worse. He doesn't have a will. What should we do? By then it's too late. And anything, if he has any type of assets, anything going on by the time he passes away, has to go through probate, and it's going to take forever to clean things up. And having a simple will, I've had a copy of my mom and dad's will for more than 30 years. Haven't needed it. Knock on wood, hope I don't need it for a long time. Same with the power of attorney. But you can have these things, and it relieves the burden to where when you need it, okay, there it is.
Well, and I think that there are people, kind of like the story I mentioned earlier about people that say, well, I don't want to think about that because that might make something happen to where it needs to be used. And I think that a will, if you can appeal, again, the appealing to your parent when they are maybe offended that you're trying to get in all their business, or you're trying to make sure what I'm going to leave for you. And it's really not that. A will is so much about, will your things go where you want them to? Would you rather them go to the state? Would you rather the state or the legal system have to, spend down thousands and thousands of dollars because you got to pay all these lawyer fees to be able to try to get it settled? Most parents would want whatever they have to go to their children, or to wherever, or to whomever they want them to. And this just allows it to, be a simple process.
It just makes it cleaner.
Yeah. And there's
Right.
a medical directive is also important too, so that if you do or do not want to be resuscitated. And there's also one called the HIPAA release for letting, so that your parents will allow you to have conversations with the doctors. And there's also
be their advocate.
Yeah, and there's also
Yeah.
a disposition of bodily remains, which is kind of a
Kind of
odd
strange,
one, but
yeah.
but
Right.
it can be really helpful as well.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I've been through all of that, and of course, we're families. Every family is different.
Mhm.
But I've had experience with my husband's family where there was no will,
Mhm.
and the 3 children left, and it took them 2 years
Mhm.
to get everything straightened out so that they could sell the vehicles, sell the 2 homes. And
Mhm.
it was awful. It was really awful.
Yep.
But having this conversation early enough, Mike, you said something that really hit home. Um, the dad's dementia, the story you told, he
Mhm.
was 89, his dementia was getting worse, and it's too late
Yep.
Mhm.
to get him to in sound mind, right? With
Yeah.
sound mind and body, right? I put my hand to this will. He can't do it,
Mhm.
and no one can do it for you.
That's right.
And after that, it can get really messy and
Very
expensive
messy
if
Yeah.
you have to
and
go in
ugly
and
and
ugly, right?
really ugly with
Yeah.
the families and
Yeah.
And most parents, I know not all, but most parents want to do what is best for their children. And that doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going to give you millions of dollars. That just means to make life easier for you. And
right.
by having the powers of attorney, by having a will, even if I'm getting nothing, even if you're leaving me out and giving everything to my sister, it's going to make life easier for me,
Mhm.
because when I have all these things I have to take care of, I don't have to worry about getting a lawyer involved, getting a judge involved, getting the city, the county, the state,
Mhm.
whoever involved.
Yeah.
I can get things done, and it's going to make life easier on me. What kind of parent doesn't want that to happen?
I would suggest that most parents probably do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yet there are so many underlying situations that
sure.
can influence, right, how
Mhm.
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
see it.
Mhm.
And there's also, you didn't mention it, but we had it in our family, which was a godsend, the revocable trust.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if they
Yeah.
put everything in a revocable trust,
Mhm.
even wills aren't even necessary at that
Mhm.
point because everything is taken care of,
Yeah.
and uh the what the parents want, right,
Yes.
Mhm.
is laid out
Right.
very clearly.
Yeah.
And
No
then there's a
questions.
trustee of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
trust.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, so we were blessed that my father was astute enough to do that,
Mhm.
before he couldn't remember what he'd done. God
Right.
bless him. Yeah.
Right. And from
Yeah.
what we've learned as well, and we are certainly not lawyers, but from what we've learned, a lot of the necessity of a trust will be depending on what state you live in, because some
Yeah.
states notoriously, or counties even, are notoriously really slow at probate. And so having a trust can really speed that up. So that's, definitely where it's
Yeah.
helpful to
Yeah.
talk to an attorney to figure out with your circumstances and where you live or where your parents live, what makes the most sense. But
Exactly. Yep.
that could certainly
Right.
be a great shortcut.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. One thing we haven't covered, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, those healthcare conversations that we should have with our parents. What are some of those?
These are also ones that can be tricky depending on the parent and or
Yeah.
the child relationship, because we see this all the time where parents will say people in our group will say that our parents won't allow them to go with them to doctor's appointments, or won't share with them what's going on, which is really scary because it makes it hard to be able to help.
Or to be ready.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that, one thing that's helpful to know is that you can reach out to a doctor one way where they may not be able, if you don't have the HIPAA form, or the parents have given you permission to talk to their doctor, the doctor may not be able to talk back, but you can at least inform them potentially, hey, I know mom's coming in for an appointment. I've been worried about this. Can you just keep an eye on it or take a second look at it?
Yeah.
So that's one kind of tactic that you can use if your parent is being resistant about giving information. Fortunately, our parents are both pretty willing.
Open about things.
Right.
Yeah, I've been going to checkups with mom and dad for years now. For about
Yeah.
gosh,
And
about
another thing I think you can appeal to the doctor
Mhm.
about, because so many people don't want to hear it from us, right? So many parents, they don't want to hear it from us. It's like our kids don't want to hear it from the parent, but if they hear it
Yes.
from somebody else.
It's
So we
such a
could
good
appeal
idea.
to the medical team,
Mhm.
the doctors, the nurses, to suggest
Mhm.
that they talk with their kids about what's going on, because they can advocate for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
that it's, and again, it's having that relationship with your parents and trying to see that I'm not trying to get in all your business, but that I want to be able to help you. I know a case recently where a woman fell and took herself to the ER by herself and didn't call the daughter until later because she didn't want to worry her.
Yeah.
And of course, then the daughter is panicked because, oh my gosh, why did you not call me? I would have come over and helped. It's like, oh, I didn't want to be a burden. So I think it's helping them see that we want to be able to serve you. You did this for us when we were kids, and we want to be able to do that as well. So I think it's having those conversations, but also knowing that it's still sort of their right to divulge what information they want to. Although I would say that once there's dementia involved,
Yeah.
in some ways, kind of all bets are off after that. And I don't mean it.
Oh,
What
in
I
some
mean,
ways.
what I just mean by that it makes it harder because they may not be able to make a rational choice of whether you should
Right.
or not. So
True.
I think that
But-
that dementia changes the conversation a lot about everything, really.
But again, depending on the personality of your parent, maybe they're either hiding or just don't want to admit to whatever the problem might be.
Mhm.
Whether
Yeah.
it's or something else. My mom never admitted to dementia. She usually said, "I'm just glad I don't have what my sister has." Like, oh, I mean,
Oh.
that type of thing. But as we saw her dementia getting worse, even slightly in the early years, I guess you could say, we'd go to the doctor and the doctor be talking to mom, and mom, oh yeah, I'm doing okay, I'm doing this and this is never bringing anything bad up.
Mhm.
And we would say, yeah, she's having a little bit of memory problems, and get a little look like, sorry, mom. But
Yeah.
that let the doctor realize, okay, I need to start giving her tests. And there's a dementia test
Mhm.
of 30 questions, and the first time she took it, she got 25 right, which is pretty good, although they're
Yeah.
really easy questions. And then the next time she took it, a couple of years later, she got 15. And last time she took one a couple of years ago, she had 2. So it's one of those things that it helps the doctor realize what the truth is.
Right.
Because so many parents are just either proud or scared. They don't
Mhm.
want to admit to what the problem is.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how
Yeah.
my mom was.
Mhm.
And I think this is probably more common than not, the burden
Mhm.
idea. I don't want to be a burden. Um, that they keep things from
Right.
us,
Mhm.
and they don't want every conversation we have to be about their failing health either.
Sure.
Sure.
Right.
Right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So all of these questions can be extremely intrusive.
Mhm.
How does one how does so I guess it's a two-part question. What are the warning signs? What are the red flags? And how do we get those conversations started?
I'll start with, I think the having those conversations before you ever even see a red flag will make things so much easier.
Yeah.
Oh,
Although
yeah.
that's not always the practicality of how it lays out. I'd say red flags are things. Are you noticing that they're forgetting things? Are you realizing that they're getting, an overdue notice because they forgot to pay a bill? And, again, some of this will depend on how present you are as far as, do you live in the same city so you see their mail potentially when you're over visiting? Those kinds of things. Are they doing things? Are they all of a sudden not keeping themselves? Their hygiene is an issue where it never has been in the past. Watching those kind of their self-care, those are sometimes going to be signs of dementia.
What do their friends or other family
Mhm.
members say? Because maybe they see them more than you do, or they
Mhm.
notice something that you're either overlooking or you're passively ignoring because you're
Mhm.
just trying not to notice.
Mhm.
And they point stuff out about, yeah, have you noticed that your mom's not remembering things like she used to? Even for me, our son, who's now 25, but when he was in junior high and high school, he would spend about a week every summer with my mom and dad. And he came home from one of them. Again, this was, gosh, 10 years ago or so, came home and back to
Mhm.
us and said, I'm worried about Graham. That's what he calls my mom. I'm worried about Graham because she's not forgetting things. And here's an
She's not
example. And
remembering things.
yeah, she's not remembering things. And he gave an example of this happened, and she got all mad at my dad about something, and it was something that she should have remembered. It
Mhm.
wasn't anything he did. Anyway, he pointed it out. And when you have other people helping you, whether it's your kids,
Mhm.
neighbors, friends, whoever who's around, who says, "Yeah, Jane just doesn't seem like
Mhm.
she's all there," or
Mhm.
"Yeah, John's moving a little slow," whatever it is, it just helps having people
Mhm.
on your
Mhm.
team
Mhm.
to help
Yeah.
notice these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I guess some other red flags are just like, how are they moving? How are they talking about things? Are they, not telling you what they're doing because they're having to go to doctor's appointments that they don't want you to know about? Are they kind of hiding
Yeah.
things? I think are all things that could potentially get your attention, and that when they get to a certain age, that you don't dismiss as quickly potentially.
Yeah.
Although the biggest challenge I think I've seen with aging parents is that it doesn't all happen at a certain age.
Right.
Different with kids, where there's sort of developmental expectations of when things will happen. With parents, there's no telling. It could
Yeah.
be when somebody's 52, it can be when they're 97. It doesn't, there's not a rhyme or reason sometimes. And so
Right.
it's just really, I think it's being aware and not just slowing down enough to be paying attention, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So how do we start these conversations? And I love that you said start them earlier before as early as possible before anything
Mhm.
It
starts to
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
deteriorate.
Mhm.
That's ideal for sure,
Mhm.
but it's rare, I
Mhm.
think.
uh-huh.
Yeah, sure.
But a lot of it has to do with the personality of your parents, the dynamics of your relationship between you and
Yeah.
them. Also, my dad's an accountant, and he loves money, loves talking about money, loves saving money. He helps our grandkids save money. His grandkids, I mean, save money. So going to him and say, Dad, do you have a power of attorney? I didn't have to because he'd had everything set up. But if I went to him and said, "Do you have a power of attorney? Because I want to make sure that everything's set up because I don't want any of your money to get lost." He'd be like, "Oh yeah, I definitely need to do that. I don't want to lose a
Yeah.
dime." Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and same thing as I said before about appealing to something about mom. So it just depends on what their personality is like. For some people, maybe you need to do it's a gift to me. Getting a will or a power of attorney is a gift for me. Thank you. So in some ways, it's like, I want to do what's best for you. You've been taking care of me for 55 years. Now I want to take care of you, make things easier on you. It depends on their personality. And you know your parent better than anybody. So use that to your advantage and figure out the way around any type of obstacle that could be there.
And sometimes it's just having sort of that prompt of, hey, mom or dad, I saw this really interesting interview and it made me realize that we haven't had some conversations that I think that might be kind of important. How about let's have those, so, using those kinds of prompts can potentially help as well. And I think that the most important thing is helping them understand that you're coming from this or coming, I'm asking these questions because I want to be able to better help you.
Yeah.
And that you're coming from a place of love, not trying to take advantage of anything.
Right. Yeah. I think that's very important. And you just said something that I thought that's such a great idea. I just saw this great interview. They talked about some stuff that we haven't talked about. Share the interview with them because they will hear it from someone else.
That's
right. And you guys are talking about all of these things that in your group, you're hearing your story. You have your own stories and the stories from other people in your group. That will, I would think, make a lot of parents feel less put upon or less ganged up upon, right? If it's coming from pros like you guys.
We just see a lot of it. We see a lot of experiences that are really great and things that are happening in families. And we see a lot of things that are really hard and challenging. And so we see both, and it breaks your heart when you see some of the situations where things haven't been discussed. There are not many options available, and it's really, really hard and sad.
And understand that there's a wide range of things that need to be discussed and covered. And some parents will want to talk about some things and not about others. And sometimes that they have this taken care of, but not that. Sometimes they have everything taken care of. Sometimes they have nothing. My mom and dad have had their burial, their coffins and everything taken care of for about 10 or 15 years now. We don't have to, my sister and I don't have to worry about that. But we approached my dad a couple of years ago and said, but we haven't talked about the actual memorial service. So not that it's going to be anytime soon. Everything's great with you, but do you have verses that you want said? Do you want songs? Do you have anybody you want to speak? Because anything like that, think about when mom or dad dies, it is so frantic. It's such an emotional time. And if you're not ready for everything, and it doesn't mean you have to have everything lined up, but if you know ahead of time, oh yeah, dad said he wanted this and this and this and this at the memorial service.
Wow.
That takes such a burden off of you.
Right. And you are blessed with a great dad who has foresight. And and my dad was the same way. So, we were blessed. Not everyone has that.
Oh, for sure.
And there are so many layers here. There are emotional layers. There are relationship layers. There are personality layers. And then there's the legal stuff. And there's so much to consider here. So I really, I could talk with you for a long time about this. We do need to wrap this up. I would love for you to share maybe your top 3 takeaways. You've given us some great tips along the way. What are the 3 top takeaways that you would like people to know for sure, walk away from this episode with?
I think this may seem overly simplistic, but the more prepared you are, the better. And the easier it will hopefully be, because we can't prevent the crisis, which often is the trigger. But the more prepared you are, the more you can just focus on the actual crisis at hand and not be having to try to figure all this other stuff at the same time. So that would be one, being the more prepared you can be, the better.
Yeah. Something that I'm sorry, go ahead.
Great. No. That's a great one to start with.
I was going to say,
what were you going to say, Mike?
Something that I've learned, and it's because of my mom having Alzheimer's, but it doesn't have to be dementia or Alzheimer's. It can be any type of medical condition, any type of anything that slows down and affects your parent, is that don't worry about what's missing. Love what's still there. And
Oh,
that's what I've tried to do with my mom. And I went to see her 2 days ago. I had to introduce myself like I always do. And we had a good conversation for an hour. And during that time, she asked me over and over and over about her. I took her flowers for her birthday, and she asked me over and over and over about how old she is. It's like, you're going to be 83, and your anniversary is on Monday. And it's like, oh, and how many years? 63. I told her 20 times, 63 years. And everything was good. She never got upset. We had a great conversation. And then at the very end, about 5 minutes before I was leaving, another resident of the memory care place, tried to come into the room we were in and kind of disrupted things. And it disrupted my mom. And I took a quick picture of us, and I stood up, and she looked at me. She said, now, how many years have we been married? And I said, you and Dad, it's coming up on 63 years. And she looked at me and she said, you're not my husband? I said, no, Mom, I'm your son. Where's my husband? And that suddenly she'd been laughing and smiling all that time, not remembering anything. She had to tell her name one time. But
yeah.
then at the end, she kind of got depressed. Like, oh, you're not my husband. And I
Terrible
walked
way
away
to have
from
to leave,
that.
too.
You could easily walk away from that being so upset about, oh my gosh, my mom thinks I'm her husband instead of my son, and instead of her son. I
Yeah.
can't believe this. Her dementia is getting worse. Alzheimer's, she's stage 6, almost stage 7. This is terrible. You could get in a funk and get really upset and depressed about things. But if you concentrate on the fact that she still loves me, we smiled and laughed for almost an hour. It was great, and love what's still there. Don't worry so much about what's missing.
I so love that you said that, Mike. Thank you for that. Because that is so easy for us to do when we are in the thick of it,
Yeah.
right? There's so much negativity surrounding the situation often. And it gets, as they get older, it gets worse. It doesn't generally get better.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
But you are so right. If we could just focus be present, right? And
Yeah.
focus on I love the way you said that, on what's here today, now, and not on what's missing, not what used to be,
Yep.
because it will never be again.
Yep.
And if you focus on that, you'll go down that rabbit hole along with her.
Yeah. And I think lastly, I would just add too, is finding people that understand, so that you have that camaraderie of other people who get what you're going through, that can and share insights, share experiences, because that is so valuable, and frankly just helps keep you more positive and helps you learn things like that, and it helps you be surrounded by those other people who get it and don't feel like you're the only one going through it.
Because we've been very lucky in the fact that everything I've gone through with Mom and Alzheimer's, I've talked to Kim about it, so she understands. Even though her mom isn't nearly that bad, we've been able to talk about it, and we've had each other to lean on. But so many people in our group, besides looking for the tips or the information and just being able to vent, they come back and they say, I'm so glad I found this group because I felt so alone. So don't be by yourself. Don't try to put it all on your back and try to carry it through. Find somebody, whether it's a support group like ours, the Parenting Aging Parents, or whether it's a friend or a neighbor or a counselor or anybody like that, to help you through this, because you don't do it all by yourself.
Because we feel like, since nobody does talk about this, if you take the reverse of that, if we do talk about it, then we can help each other.
Right.
And that, I think, is what's important.
And you never know what ideas may come out of a simple conversation or a simple feed of questions and answers and thoughts. You just never know. So the link for Kim and Mike's group, Parenting for Aging Parents, on Facebook, will be in the show notes. But just go to Facebook, Parenting for Aging Parents. It pops right up. I did it the other day. And I joined that group. Even though I'm not caring for aging parents, I'm still a caregiver. There's going to be good stuff for caregivers of every kind,
for sure,
in that group. So be sure to join it. All right, Kim and Mike, thank you so much for your tips, for your advice, for sharing your stories. Thank you for being so transparent. I know that people are going to want to learn more about what you're doing. So what is the one best way that they can connect with you?
If they go to our website, parentingagingparents.com, there's a button right there where you can click to join to get right to the Facebook group to make it easy. Also, though, we've done 60 plus interviews with all kinds of different experts about all kinds of different topics, and those are all there accessible right there. And we also have the Caregivers Key guide that we've created as well. So the website is kind of the best place to be able to find the most resources and still be able to get to the group
And there's
as well.
a quick link to contact us to send us an email on the website.
That's amazing. So much there. And a guide. And you've written a guide.
Yes.
We did. That was a little because I needed to have all that information in one place because I kept getting questions from the doctor saying, well, when did mom have a shingles vaccine? And I said, I don't know. And mom didn't.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
it can be everything from that to their passwords to what bills do they pay online, where actually is the will located, all of
That's
the important
fabulous.
information that you need to have.
And they can get that on your website. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Kim and Mike, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. It's a tough conversation to have, but it is one of the life transitions, and especially if we are working and trying to do this all while we're managing our careers and other life responsibilities. And let's not forget about our own self-care.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
it is my pleasure. My pleasure. And for everyone who is with us today or listening later, I really appreciate you being a part of this community. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, or click a star, and let us know what you thought of it. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women. Plus, as a career and life coach, I work with women to help them navigate challenging times like these, all kinds of transitions, more quickly and gracefully. So, if this episode resonates with you and you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out and let's talk. You'll find the links to connect with Kim and Mike, as I said, in the show notes below. And I'd invite you to continue this conversation with me in my private Facebook group, the Career Transition Roadmap. So again, look for the links below. And let's meet again here next Wednesday, every Wednesday here for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.